everyone. Welcome to this episode of E-Coffee with Experts. I'm your host, Matt Fraser. And on today's show, I have a very special guest with me, Eric Richmond. Eric is the president and founder of Expert SEO Consulting, a search marketing and social media agency headquartered in Norwalk, Connecticut. As a veteran of 25 years in digital marketing, he's established himself as an expert in SEO and has held speaking roles at SMX, SES, and other conferences. He is on the board of directors for both the Internet Old Timers Foundation and U.S. Internet Pioneers Foundation. He is also a lifelong car enthusiast, my apologies, and serves on the board of directors of the Connecticut Valley region of the Porsche Club of America, where he is also editor of Challenge, the club's monthly magazine. On weekends, you can often find Eric in his Porsche Boxster on the track at Lime Rock Park. Eric, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Eric, how would your high school teachers describe you as a student?
Terrible.
Yeah.
They would not describe me as a very good student. I did really well on standardized exams.
Uh-huh.
But I was always wandering. My mind was always elsewhere in class.
Yeah. Have you always wanted to be an entrepreneur? Like, for instance, did you have paper out when you were a kid, lemonade stand, things like that? Did you always want to be your own business owner?
No, but my family had a retail store when I was growing up.
Oh, yeah.
So from the time I was 12 years old on the weekends, I'd go into the store with my dad.
Uh-huh.
And when I got to be 16, I went to work there every afternoon after high school. But because it was a family operation, for me, it was very entrepreneurial.
Of course.
I had a big role in all of the things we did. It didn't manifest itself as a paper route or a lemonade stand or anything like that, but I think it was always there.
Yeah. It's interesting. I recently found out that part of your personality is not just nurture, but also nature. Like, it's in your DNA, which I find fascinating. Sometimes people are entrepreneurs and their parents are entrepreneurs. It's generational. So it's very interesting. So what was, besides the retail store that you were involved in with the family business, what was one of the first businesses that you started?
I went from the retail business to doing computer consulting.
Interesting.
I set myself up. My dad retired, and I had actually written a software package that we used to manage the inventory at the store.
Oh, wow.
It was very early on. I built the thing using an IBM 8086 computer and Keybase 2. And word got out that I was a bit of a computer guy. So when my dad decided to close the store and I had to go find something else to do, there were a number of people who said, "Hey, can you come and do some computer stuff for us?" So I went right into the consulting space.
Wow. And how did that evolve from that into where you are today and into starting an SEO agency?
Oh, it was all dumb luck, if I'm perfectly honest.
Huh?
Yep. So the computer consulting became less about writing software and more about marketing consulting.
Oh.
And I did a lot. There were a number of years where I did a lot of print stuff for people using desktop, Adobe PageMaker, Office PageMaker originally. And I had a client who had started a dinner delivery business, who was a really nice guy, but a complete Luddite when it came to computers. Probably about 1995, he was getting phone calls from what was then a very small marketing company called Modem Media.
Oh, yeah.
And we used to deliver dinners to their offices back before they were anything. They were just a tiny business. Mm-hmm. And somebody would call him up and say, "Listen, it would be a lot easier for us to order food from you every night if you build a website."
Yeah.
And his eyes glazed over and he called me up and he said, "You're my computer guy. What's a website?" And
wow.
This was early.
Yes,
so
I remember.
In 1995, over Christmas break, I built the guy a 200-page website. I said, "We don't need to pay them to do it. I can do this." So I built him a website.
200 pages.
Yeah, because it was restaurant menus and it had to be searchable. But in 1995, you couldn't do any kind of searches.
Yeah.
So I had to build.
I remember.
I had to build unique pages. So if somebody wanted Chinese food, here's a list of every Chinese restaurant that we served. And
Are those all
that's how it went.
HTML tables?
Yep. Yep.
Wow.
I made extensive use of HTML tables, which I learned from the people at Laplink. It was the first one I ever saw that had tables on their website. It went from there. I did that kind of thing for about 6 months. And my wife said to me, you really need to get a real job.
Oh, yeah.
A friend of mine was working for a systems integration company in New York City. They were looking for an internet consultant.
Okay.
He brought me in. I interviewed with the CEO of the company and they hired me on the spot. And I went and they placed me at a bank and I built an intranet for them. And then I got a phone call from Modem Media. And by that time, they'd gone from 10 people working on the second floor above a restaurant in South Norwalk, Connecticut, to having their own office space with about 100 employees.
Oh, wow.
And they were staffing up. They just taken on Compact Computer as an account.
Wow.
No, I'm sorry. It was not Compact. This goes back. It was Delta Airlines. What they brought me in for. They brought me in to do a small project for them. They liked the work and they kept me. And it mushroomed from there. I went from Modem Media to APL Digital, which was the very first digital advertising agency on Madison Avenue. It was part of Ammirati Puris Lintus. And then from there to Gray Advertising until the bubble burst.
Yeah. Yeah. What was that like living through that?
Oh, timing couldn't have been worse. Couldn't have been worse. That's where I worked on the Compact business. I was in Houston constantly and we had plans to go public. So Gray Interactive was going to take over Gray Direct and we were going to go public in August of 2000.
Okay.
And they put me on the road show. I went all over the world with a couple of bankers from ING Barings Bank. And then the bubble burst, pulled the IPO and started cutting staff every place.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you eventually part of that staff that was cut?
Yeah.
So how did you overcome that challenge?
I switched gears.
Okay.
We had done a project for Lucasfilm for one of the Star Wars movies in conjunction with a tech company in New York City called Viewpoint.
Oh, wow.
I got really friendly with the CEO of Viewpoint and he'd been trying to hire me for a while and I was perfectly comfortable at Gray. And when they let everybody go over there, I called him up and I said, Bob, you still want me to come on board? He's, yes, now come. So I went over there and I did that for probably 3 years, maybe 4. And I really wanted to get back into the agency business. I found working for an agency to be really fulfilling. Especially if you're a bit of an entrepreneur, you're in a room with a bunch of creative people, you're knocking ideas around.
Yeah.
The juices are flowing and I missed that environment.
Yeah.
So I saw an ad for somebody looking for an account director at 360i, which at the time was the search marketing agency of the year.
Oh.
And I answered the ad. They called me in for an interview and I had no idea the guy that I was going to be interviewing with had been my boss at Modem Media.
Oh, so wow.
I walked in. He said, don't you bother bleeping, checking who you're going to be interviewing with, laughed, gave me a big hug, and we sat down to talk. And he, after about 15 minutes, he said, you know what? I really don't need you to come in as an account director, which is what I wanted to do. I enjoy the account side of the business. He said, I need you to herd the cats in the SEO department.
Oh,
and I said,
interesting.
John, SEO is not my strong suit. This was 2007, August 2007. And he said, but you know it, right? I said, yeah. And as it turns out, the husband of one of the women I worked with at APL Digital had invented a very early search engine. And we used to talk about it all the time. So I understood what a spider was, how they went about crawling. I knew all of this, but it was not something that I'd specialized in. Anyway, They hired me at 360i, put me in charge of a staff of 22 people across 2 different offices, one in New York, one in Atlanta.
Wow.
And my very first client, the very first meeting I took when they hired me, that day, I had to meet with the chief technology officer at Martha Stewart, the media, who was one of our clients.
Wow.
I won't give you his name, but he had been whining that that 360i wasn't giving him somebody senior enough in the meetings.
Oh.
So they had hired me as vice president of search and technology. And they said, okay, you're high enough. Go talk to him.
Wow.
But it turned out I had a knack for it. And I've been doing that ever since.
That's amazing. That's an amazing journey.
I stumbled into it.
Yeah. No, that's cool. You've been in SEO for nearly 2 decades. How much has the SEO landscape changed since you first became interested?
Quite a bit. Quite a bit. It's one of the things that if you're going to be in this business, you have to like sifting through data. You have to doing the research, but you also have to like every day waking up and knowing that there's going to be some kind of a change you hadn't anticipated.
Yeah.
SEO is one of those things where there's three legs of a stool on SEO is what I tell people. There's what you're doing. There's what your competition is doing. And there's what Google is doing.
Yeah.
And the only thing there you can control is what you're doing. Other 2 legs of that stool, you have to pay attention to them, but you have to realize that they're completely out of your control. There's nothing you can do about it. Things have changed a lot. You can't just count on the number of backlinks that your website gets. That ship sailed a long time ago.
Yeah.
You get very little help from Google in terms of figuring out which keywords you need to pay attention to.
Yeah, since they buried. Yeah.
The guidelines for what they're going to determine to be quality content shift constantly. So there's always a challenge. And that's the fun part. It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah. How do you keep up with that then?
A lot of reading.
Yeah.
There are a lot of reading and a lot of networking.
Okay.
And I find them to be equally valuable.
Oh, for sure.
There are some blogs that I pay attention to. Barry Schwartz is an old friend, so I read his stuff that he puts out. I used to pay a lot of attention to what Danny Sullivan wrote till he went over to the dark side with Google.
Yeah.
Marie Haynes is invaluable. She does a really good industry newsletter that she puts out. And there's some others. And I used to, until COVID hit, I religiously went to 4 to 6 search conferences every year.
Yeah.
And there were some that I spoke at. You had mentioned them, but I learned the most after the sessions were over.
From networking.
I had some fairly high placed friends at Google and at Bing and at Majestic and a number of other companies. And we would all go out and grab beers after the conference was over
and chat.
Yeah. And that was really valuable.
Yeah. What would you tell someone who is just wanting to get in SEO today? What's one of the first things you tell them to do? If they want to learn about SEO?
Oh boy. I would say it's not as easy as it used to be. You can't, picking it up, learning it yourself, learning by doing is always an invaluable experience, but it's changed so much that it's not as easy to do that as it used to be.
Yeah.
So I would say find a college that's teaching that, or take some online courses.
Yeah.
But do that to really learn the basics of what's happening with SEO. There's so many different things that are going on that are impacting it. And of course, the tools that you use to do the job are changing constantly.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. What are some of those tools that you used to use that aren't in existence anymore?
I was waiting for you to ask that. I used to have a really favorite tool called Market Samurai, which is not
I'm
around
laughing because it's not. And I knew you were going to say that because it used to be my favorite as well. And it
was a wonderful little Swiss Army knife of a tool.
Yep. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
You could get competitive research. You could do some keyword research. You could really do a lot of information, and it was very handy. And the nice thing was that you just bought it once for the year and it sat on your desktop. And I missed that.
Yeah. Now it's all subscription, monthly subscription or annual subscription based. And it almost seems like there is no one tool to rule them all. You almost have to use several of them, and maybe some of them at the same time. Like I know there's some data that Majestic has that maybe Ahrefs doesn't have and SEMrush doesn't have, or so on and so forth. You want to put all the data in one spot and correlate the data and look at the data and say, okay, hey, there's something here that SEMrush doesn't have, that Majestic has, or that maybe in a competition, a competitive analysis or an on-page analysis, and then in the on-page tools like Surfer SEO and Page Optimizer Pro and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot to learn. Would you say learning HTML would be important? I think someone should still understand what a heading tag is, H1, H2.
You know what? I don't even think about that because I think they teach HTML coding in elementary school these days.
Oh, probably. I have no idea.
My kids are in their 40s.
Oh, okay.
I have no idea. But yeah, obviously you need to have a working knowledge of HTML. It's really helpful if you understand JavaScript and style sheets and PHP.
Yeah.
In particular, simply because 85% of the world runs on WordPress these days.
Yeah, for sure.
So even if you're not good enough to write code, having a working knowledge, so at least you understand in theory how a script is processed, how things are moved along. I think that's very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Do you think on-page SEO has become way more important in the latter days as of recent than it was before?
I would say to you, yes, depending on how you define on-page SEO.
Sure. Okay.
So what I mean by that is, if part of your definition of on-page SEO is, for example, keyword density, I would say that's not nearly as important as it used to be.
Yeah.
There's a guy who built an agency called Stone Temple Consulting, Eric Engie.
Okay.
And a number of years ago, well before Google started thinking this way, Eric talked about the concept of topical relevancy.
Yeah.
And I remember that because a light bulb went on.
Okay. So you were mentioning Stone Temple Consulting and the changes in on-page SEO in regards to topical authority. And the difference, if on-page SEO is defined as keyword density, then that's not what you mean. And you were defining what you mean by on-page SEO, and how before Google was even considering topical authority, the gentleman who started Stone Temple Consulting, is that
Eric Engie.
Eric Engie.
And I believe he sold the company. He's still with it, but now they're called Proficient Digital. I believe that's the name. So anyway, Eric used to talk about the concept of topical relevancy, which is that if you take your web page and you pull the header and the footer out of the equation, it means that the written content, the body content, as well as any of the content circulation widgets that may be on the page in the right rail or someplace just below your body content, that those things all need to be related to the topic that's discussed on that page. And the idea was that as publishers, a lot of media people would put links in the right-hand rail of a web page that were important because they wanted to circulate traffic to them. They were important because they had a high revenue per 1,000 number on that page. And if you were able to drive traffic to that page, you were able to increase your advertising revenue, or you were able to drive people to other pages to increase time on site because that was important to your ComScore numbers. And Eric used to say, that's all well and good, but from the perspective of the search agency, or the search engines rather, you want all of those links to be top relevant. so that if the person leaves that page and goes to another page, it's because they found what you have said to be interesting to them and they want to learn more.
Yeah.
And if you think about it that way, then you're actually putting less reliance on the idea of making sure your page is ranking for 6 or 7 or 8 keywords, and more on, okay, am I presenting information for this topic that addresses the need of the user?
Yeah.
And if you fast forward several years to where Google's algorithm is right now, and you look at their quality rater guidelines, one of the things that's in there is, did you meet the needs of the user?
Yeah.
Is the user's search intent met by the content that you put on that page? And that goes back to what Eric was saying about topical relevancy.
Yeah.
So there are certain things about on-page SEO that I still consider to be important, right? You need to pay more attention now than ever, I think, to the structure of the page.
Yeah.
The
absolutely.
use of headings and subheadings and subheadings, because all of those things need to be related to each other. They give the search engine at the very beginning a rough outline of what you're presenting on the page and how you're presenting it. And if you structure your outline properly, it's a signal to the search engine that, hey, these people know what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
It's also helpful because if you do a query on Google, I don't think Bing has implemented this, but Google certainly has. You put in a 4 or 5, 6 word query, and if you click on a link, the link you go to will be highlighted in yellow. And there's your specific query information within the body of the page that you've gone to, but it's highlighted for you.
Yeah.
So
I've noticed that lately.
That goes back to a properly structured piece of content. So I think on-page SEO I think it's just as important as it used to be. I just think it's changed a little bit. The dynamics of how you implement your on-page SEO have changed.
Yeah. And it's amazing how the rich snippets and feature snippets, and all of those are changing. And the people also ask, to the point where Google is showing so much information on the SERP result that sometimes it's the website traffic, that the information's already being provided there. So how do you think website owners and business owners can overcome that challenge of Google showing people the result right there, and they're not letting the traffic might be down? And how do you solve that problem?
That's a good question. It's been an issue for several years, ever since they came up with the concept of a featured snippet, and they started adding the people also ask and related searches and the different pieces of the knowledge panel. I think there's 13 or 14 different addressable pieces of a search result page right now.
Yeah.
And the question a lot of people have is, how do you handle that? You framed it right perfectly. The answer is that at least for me and for my clients, I tell them, don't fight it. Work with it. Particularly with respect to the featured snippet, the related searches, and the people also ask. I tell my clients, don't just think of the search result page as the organic listings. It's great. It's a wonderful thing if you rank number 1 in the organic listings. But if there's a featured snippet available, that's really where we want to be. I don't care if the featured snippet pulls 5 or 6 lines out of the piece of content and shows it on the search result page.
Yeah.
It's never going to show the entire article that you've written. And there's a link right below it that's going to take people to your page. So that's the first thing I want to target.
Yeah.
I still want to try to appear within the organic listings, but it's not the worst thing in the world to be in those related searches and the people also search.
Yeah. Yeah. People also ask, I would agree with you. It's amazing to see where we've gone. I remember when I first signed up for a Gmail account with an invite. Like, my friend literally sent me an invite for a Gmail account. And I don't have that Gmail account anymore. I shut it down, but I wish I had chosen my name as my username, frankly, because I could have at the time. But anyway, I thought, oh, privacy and all this stuff, but whatever. Anyway, nevertheless, the point I'm trying to make is and their names escape me right now, my apologies, the founders of Google.
Larry and Sergey.
Since they came up with the PageRank algorithm and all these things, and since Google was created in, I believe it was 1997, we've seen an incredible amount of changes happen over the years where you could just stick a meta title in the keyword in the meta title and keyword stuff the meta descriptions with keywords and so on and so forth to becoming incredibly sophisticated. But in some ways, Google has dominated search. And for the first time since they started as a company, they have felt threatened. I'm not sure if you've been watching the news or not. But on November 30th of 2022, the world changed as we know it. I know even like my parents and other people, my wife, friends, non-geeky people, tech people, marketing, they don't understand the significance of the change that has happened. And what I'm referring to is the launch of ChatGPT by OpenAI.
Yep.
It is literally, people are going to be looking back, and people may say I'm being melodramatic about this, but I'm not. I don't think I am at all. People are going to be looking back at this and saying that was a day in the world where history changed. And it was like, if you could count the first day of the Industrial Revolution for AI evolution and revolution, that would be the day to me. It's the first time in 20 years Google has felt threatened by another product in their position. Even the creator of Gmail said that within 3 years, OpenAI will put Google out of business if they don't do something. And what's his name? The CEO of Microsoft, and his name escapes me at the moment, was on an interview recently saying that search it's now a brand new game. We're all starting from zero again. And when I've seen the implementations of what I already signed up for to be pre-notified to start using it, the implementation of ChatGPT with Bing, and Google they lost what, $100 billion because of a flubbed up presentation that they never should have done. It's actually interesting to see them on their heels. And I'm not going to lie and say I'm not happy about it. I am happy about it because Google's been this big bet for some people of us in SEO. You look at them in one way, it's a big bad tyrant sort of deal where they're like, the maker of the rules. And now someone's coming along and challenging them. What do you think about that? Like the influence of AI on search and how much that's going to change things. To me, it's unbelievable.
I'm going to take a slightly different view of it than you.
Sure.
I think the place that that ChatGPT and its ilk will have the biggest change is with respect to devices like Google Home and Alexa, where people are doing
voice search.
And by extension,
this is especially so.
It's okay.
Also on your cell phone, where people are doing searches. And the reason for that is, the reason for that is in an environment where you are more likely to speak your query than to type it out, you're also more likely to ask a question in a format that is actionable by AI.
Yeah.
And people aren't trained to do that yet on a desktop device. So I think there's going to be some time there where that needs to phase in. The other thing is both Bing's implementation of ChatGPT and Google's implementation of Bard. Google's been toying with this for a while. BERT was their first attempt at AI, and that's been running with Google's algorithm for several years now.
Yeah.
And Bard is a complete reimagining of that. It's using a different technology, but it's still AI. And I think that it's going to change, but I do think people will still want to see a number of different results for whatever they're searching for. I don't think that it's our nature to ask a question and get an answer and go, oh, okay, that's it. I'm satisfied.
Oh, yeah.
you're still going to want to look a little bit deeper. And from that perspective, I think that at least in terms of visual search, which is what Bing and Google are for the most part now, there are still going to be organic listings and there's still going to be visual listings because you're going to want a second and third and a fourth opinion. You're just not going to blindly accept whatever the AI feeds back to you. So from a user perspective, I think there's still a lot of opportunity for search.
Oh, I agree with you. I just think that Google now has a competitor. Like Bing with ChatGPT is a real competitor for Google. Unless they, and like I said, the Bard was a total flub up. I think they did it prematurely because they were on their heels. And for instance, it's like the other day, I'm not sure this is my experience and it may not be yours, but I've been noticing Google search results have been terrible lately. There's things I'm searching for and they're not matching the intent of what I actually wanted to find. And this could be on behalf of there's no more better searches, but I wish I had written it down as a for instance that I could share because I spend so much time on the computer. But I finally got so pissed off or frustrated that I just went to ChatGPT and asked it the question and it gave me the answer and Google couldn't. I was like, wow, there's so many things I ask it now that I go there first.
I don't know if you've heard this before. As I mentioned earlier, I had some friends who were fairly high placed at Bing and at Google.
Yeah.
And one of my buddies from Bing said to me, we're at the Oktoberfest at one of the search conferences. And he said, Google wants to index every piece of digital content that's out there. Yeah. They want to have the absolute largest index of everything digital that's existing in the world. Bing doesn't. Bing's mission is to have only the most important stuff in its index. So where Google might index 2,000 pages that it finds on a website, Bing would be perfectly happy if it only had the 200 most important ones.
Interesting.
Now, I don't know if that's changed because that goes back a number of years, maybe 5 years. But the person that I heard this from was really high up at Bing. Yeah. And he said, we can't compete with Google on the sheer volume, the sheer size of the index, but we can't have the most relevant, most important content.
Yeah.
And if that's still the case, then I would argue that also applies to their use of ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So
the only thing is that OpenAI has crawled the entire internet for ChatGPT.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. It'll be very.
I mean, I've used ChatGPT to write code for me. I find it really good. I say, this is what I want you to do. I want you to write this particular routine to accomplish this. These are the variables I want to use. And I want you to write it in PHP, or I want you to write it in Ruby on Rails for me. And I will get back a wonderfully functional piece of code that I don't have to pay attention to.
Yeah.
When I ask it other questions, you get back sometimes some really good information and sometimes some stuff where you're reading it and you're going, huh? What?
Yeah.
That just doesn't make sense in there.
Yeah.
There's work to do on it.
Yeah.
But I do think that sort of technology is the future of, it brings us into the future of Star Trek, where you're tapping your communicator and you say computer, and it gives you an answer.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I could talk for an hour about the ways I've not only used ChatGPT, but other AI instances like Jasper over the last year in regards to creating taglines for businesses, coming up with business ideas, doing SEO, meta descriptions and titles, and so on and so forth. It's been quite fascinating to me. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. And it's been a pleasure having you here. I'm so glad you came on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Hey, where can our audience find out more about you if they choose to do so online?
You can find me at expertseoconsulting.com.
Right on, right on. And are you on Twitter or LinkedIn or anything like that?
I am on Twitter. My Twitter is SEO Expert Eric.
Oh, cool.
And on LinkedIn, I think I'm actually one of the lucky ones that got my name.
Oh, yeah.
LinkedIn.com/Eric Richmond.
Cool. Right Right on. We'll make sure to put those links in the show notes. And it's been an absolute pleasure again having you here. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. Have a good day.